This is Patrick Russell. I'm interviewing Donald Thieme for the first time. This interview is taking place on December the 6th of 2022. This interview is being conducted by the Making History Project. How are you doing today, Donald?
Very good, thank you.
All right. How about we start with you telling me where you were born?
Augusta, Georgia, Camp Gordon,
All right.
1943. Yeah.
And what is your date of birth?
10/3/1943.
Okay, and that makes you how old today?
79.
79, all right. And tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what it was like.
Good childhood in Needham, Massachusetts. Suburban town. Went through high school there. Just a good childhood.
And what's the name of the town again?
Needham,
Needham. And what is that located near?
Boston, just outside of Boston.
Okay. And what is Needham known for?
Not a whole lot.
It's known.
Actually, the most famous thing was a bank robbery back in the 1920s.
Okay. It's also known for being close to Boston.
Right.
Okay. And how big was your family growing up?
Five brothers.
All right. And where did you fall in the pecking order?
I'm the oldest.
Okay. Well, there's some privileges to that.
Yep.
All right. And what did your parents do?
My father was disabled military from Second World War. He was a new engineer, electrical engineer. My mother was a housewife.
Okay.
He did a lot of extensive travel around the world as part of a major construction company, Stone and Webster. So he's gone a lot. But the childhood is, in the sense that it was terrific, in the sense that he was a scoutmaster. We were out hunting, did all sorts of things. So it was pretty great, actually.
Yeah. And so you touched upon it a little bit. What kind of hobbies did you have growing up?
Sailing. I would just say what regular kids did. Nothing dramatic at all. I think when you get to college, did you want to go that far yet?
Well, yeah. I mean, did you play any sports in school or other things?
I was one of the smallest people in high school, so I did try to play baseball, and I was really small, and so I grew in my first year in college, so maybe a foot, that much, and so it was really, it was very, very unusual. So as a result, though, I don't think my nerves ever reached what my height was, which is 6'1", okay, and that's why I'm a crappy golfer, crappy tennis, anything that eye-hand coordination was, terrible.
All right.
Yeah.
And so where did you go to high school?
Needham High School.
All right. And did you graduate from there?
Yes.
All right. And did you end up going to, you said you went to college. Where'd you go?
I went to Northeastern. I started off in engineering. It's a 5-year co-op school. And then I was in chemical engineering, but I switched to business. So I was there undergraduate for 6 years.
All right.
Actually made a difference in life. A very positive difference, I think. It made me more mature.
Okay. And you graduated from Northeastern?
Yes.
What year was that?
67.
Okay. And did there come a point where you ended up joining the military?
Yes, I was ROTC from the get-go because we couldn't really afford college. That's why I went to Northeastern, which was, a co-op school. For the family didn't have that much money. So I don't remember how much we got paid. Maybe it was $50 a month or something to be a ROTC student. So I grabbed it. It was cash. And so I wound up having 6 years of ROTC. And the good part of that was that, I had co-op jobs, so I did a lot of different kind of jobs. And my college roommate at the parachute center. So I wanted, out of parachuting. So by the time I graduated and ready to go in the Army, I had hundreds of jumps, maybe as many as 600 jumps, maybe more. I just don't remember the number off the top of my head right now.
Well, wait a minute. How did you get so many jumps?
We worked at the parachute center.
Okay.
So it was that's what we did. We just tried to make a business out of it, and training students and stuff like that. And I could do as many as 20 a day. We once had a contest, and I could see if I could jump 20 times a day. Just pack them and jump, what have you.
And where are you jumping out of at the parachute center?
We had Cessna 172,
All right.
71-8s and stuff like that.
So you're jumping out of planes. It's legitimate jumps.
Right.
Okay. You're not jumping off of a platform somewhere.
No, this is
okay.
It's some very wild things. It would completely be illegal today.
Such as what?
Jumping through clouds, not knowing where the ground was below, where you were coming off of. So,
all right.
Always sober. A lot of bad judgment, but it all worked out. No one got seriously hurt.
Seriously hurt.
Yeah.
Okay. And so what was it like, just briefly tell me what the ROTC experience was like while juggling school at the same time.
It was a good experience in the sense that I had a lot of camaraderie with I liked the guys that were in it. And then we had, the good fortune of having tactical officers that recently returned from Vietnam. And I was always interested in joining the infantry. So I paid a lot more attention to that. Northeastern as a school was meant to provide ROTC officers for Signal Corps and engineers. But we could opt into whatever we really wanted to be. And most of the guys I hung with most of them wanted to be in the infantry. And so we had special groups within the ROTC that allowed for that kind of training. So we had things that a lot of opportunities such as small boat training, long range patrols into the mountains and stuff like that were all available to us, which we took advantage of, and with good tactical officers.
And why did you gravitate to the infantry given your prior background in engineering and your father's background in engineering?
Yeah, it was just, I think it goes back to really childhood, that when you go to the library and you start seeing what you're interested in reading. I was always interested in the military stuff, but going back to the Greek times, I always felt, what would it be like to be a spear carrier in Greek time? What did that person ever experience? So I was always relating to the grunt, always relating to that. Saying, well, how would I handle something like that? Where you had no control, you're sitting in a big mass. What the hell is what that life is like? It looked like it was going to be very miserable. And how do you function in something like that? And so that really appealed to me a lot. I don't know why, but it did. I like the survival stuff and what have you, and goes along with that. But mostly as a test for myself. So
and then you followed that theme by jumping out of airplanes 600 times.
Oh yeah, that was a blast. The first time, that was just, you just fall in love with that. Yeah, that was just.
And was the parachute center part of ROTC, or that's just a separate business?
No, but they integrated little bits of it, because we had the American Parachute Association had some recognition, and the ROTC allowed for that recognition, what have you.
Okay. And so, did there come a point where you entered into military service full time?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
when was that?
That was I think August 1967.
All right.
So I was able to. So my first assignment was the 101st. I was a regular Army commission, not a reserve commission like the ROTC. Um, so they asked me if I could have any position in the Army. What's my first choice? So I chose the group that trained me at Fort Devens in my summer camp. So they didn't have a platoon leader for the platoon from the 101st that trained us. So I said, I want to be their platoon leader. And lo and behold, I got it. So,
And you're talking about the 101st Airborne?
yes.
All right.
And so my first assignment was the anti-tank platoon leader for the 1st of the 506 Airborne Infantry.
All right.
And
So how old are you at that point?
67. I think 23.
All right. So you're 23. You're a young buck. You
Yep.
are a strapping officer. You show up to the 101st Airborne, and now you have to lead a platoon. And how was that experience? Were you accepted?
Well, I knew them all.
Oh, okay.
You know, the first thing I hear as I walk into the barracks as a new young second lieutenant who hasn't gone yet to any military schools. Like, in other words, I hadn't been to officer training or anything like that. Was, oh shit, was what I heard. These are the guys that harassed me as a, during training. So,
And were they older than you, I suppose?
not really, no, because there's a lot of privates there. You know, I was a lot older. I was a lot older, because I had those extra 2 years at Northeastern. I was older than most,
Okay.
even the officers, the West Point officers and whatnot. So it was a different level of maturity I had there. That was, and so I noticed the difference, how I thought about things. And they did. I was far more cynical. I don't think I started off thinking I was ever going to be a very good officer.
How come?
I just felt that some of the stuff I thought was a little absurd, but you would, some things are absurd, and I might voice it.
And is there a difference between, say, those that come in from ROTC versus, you mentioned, West Point officers?
Oh yeah.
What's describe that difference for me?
Well, what I could and I wouldn't generalize it to the ROTC versus West Point either. I think it had to do with age. So think of a 20-year one. A West Pointer is a 21-year-old who lived in a bubble during their 4 years. Very restricted, disciplined bubble. They're apt to act a little bit like frat boys when freed because they really had a tight leash on them. I, on the other hand, grew up during free love and everything else, during my college years, and free to do anything I want, So there's I think there's a lot of life experience I had they hadn't quite had yet. Plus they were under, and I hate to generalize because it really isn't true, but they had expectations on them, individually from their families or their parents or their dad, because there were a lot of ex-military generals and who had their sons at West Point, what have you. So it was a little bit. I could see differences on that, and that's all I can say about it right now. I mean, the guys I met were just great. All in all, they were just great, wonderful people. So that part was good.
And how did your family feel about you getting into the military?
And my father was very upset.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
Because well, I think he felt that especially about Vietnam, he thought it'd be very changed, but he was in combat engineers. He got as far as the Hurtgen Forest, and came back, I think, very damaged. So he was worried in that way.
And did any of your brothers also get involved in the military?
Yes, one of them was drafted, but because I was in Vietnam in those days, there was an option which I took advantage of, saying that he, requested he was drafted as a private, so he didn't have to go to Vietnam, contiguous with me, and he wound up going to the Berlin Brigade. So.
All right, and you joined and when you were in ROTC, the Vietnam War was already going on, right?
Right. Oh yeah.
All right, and so you joined regardless. So, how did you? What were you feeling was going to happen in your and the involvement already in the Vietnam War? Like it would seem like you were going to be going there, correct?
Oh yeah, I fully expected. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. And again, my TAC off, I had the good fortune of having a TAC officer, a captain, who was one of the survivors of the Ai Drang Valley battle, which was the first battle where the Cav fought against the North Vietnamese. And he was the executive officer of Alpha Company that at X-Ray and Landing Zone, Albany. So there's a movie out about the Battle of the Ai Drang, which Hal Moore was the commanding officer of it. And for soldiers, I can't remember the name. We were soldiers, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And but then the following day, after that battle, there was another battle in this, a few 100 yards away, really, which the U.S. unit was virtually wiped out. Well over 100 men killed, and that was never reported. And he was a survivor of that. So I had some good combat experience TAC officers that, I took advantage of. I had lots of talks with them, and they were willing to share their experiences and helped me immensely in my own experience over there.
And so, what was your MOS in the military?
Eventually, overall.
Yeah, overall.
Overall, I became Special Forces officer.
Okay. And
I think it was called 71542 or something like that was the number.
All right. And at the time you went to Vietnam, what weapons were you qualified to use or equipment?
What weapons?
Mm-hmm. Weapons or equipment were you qualified to use? You said you were an anti-tank?
Originally with the 101st, but I went over with the 82nd. So what occurred was that after a few months with the 101st, obviously realized I hadn't been to any schools whatsoever. I wasn't a parachutist or anything. I had to go to Fort Benning to get my basic officer course, my parachute training, and my ranger training. And after that, which was an experience in itself in the sense that the 101st deployed to Vietnam, and when I was in Ranger School, they told me I would have to go to the 82nd Airborne because the 101st was going. It was already gone. And I expected to go back to my old unit. They said, no, we don't send the second. I stopped off at Washington, D.C. at the personnel office. And I wanted to go back to my old unit. And they told me, no, we don't send second lieutenants over to Vietnam. You're going to go to the 82nd. So the day I arrived at the 82nd was the night we deployed to Vietnam. So you can picture, I mean, it's a story in itself, and I won't waste time talking about it, but it was really weird. Everybody else in my Ranger class, most of them were West Pointers. They were going to take their leave because you're pretty well wasted at the end of Ranger school. And I picked up my wife then and said, "Oh, all the jobs will be gone. The good jobs will be gone. So we're going to skip my leave and go right down to Fort Bragg," which we did. So I dropped her off at base housing, reported to headquarters, and they told me there was no officers there to see me because they didn't know what was going on, and told me to walk down to the second of the 505. Maybe there's a job there for me. I went down there and met my friend Al Levine, who's the first lieutenant. He's the S1 personnel officer there, and he put me to work right away. And it's a whole other story that would take an hour to talk about. It's hysterical. And it wound up, next day we're on our way to Vietnam. But we didn't know that at the time. We thought we were still going to Thailand. So.
All right, so you literally arrived on Fort Bragg and within 24 hours, you're going to Vietnam?
Yeah.
And you went directly from Ranger School to Fort Bragg?
Right.
Okay.
I was an animal. Okay.
Okay, so now you find yourself on your way to Vietnam. Where are you going?
Well, there was a C-141 Loadmaster. I mean, not Loadmaster, but I don't know what it's called. But had about 90 troops. They were a disparate group of troops, meaning they came from many different units. We just piled on the thing. It was just two officers, myself and Al Levine, the personnel officer. And off we go. We think we're going to Thailand. It's only a rumor. No one told us anything at all. We had already drawn our weapons. We had ammunition, pallets put into the aircraft. And off we go. Thinking we're going to go to Thailand, get reorganized, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, so we land for fuel in Alaska and then go off again. And going across the night, there's a long trail. There must have been I'm told afterwards, there's over 100 C-141s in trail crossing the Pacific. So we get to Yokota, Japan, and then we're not allowed to get off out of the plane except to go underneath the wing to piss. But then the toilets didn't work or anything like that. There wasn't much as far as toilets go in a C-141 anyway, but we got off there, take off from Yokota, refueled, and the pilots had orders. So I'm sitting up in the jump seat in the cockpit. They opened up their orders and said, "We're going into Chu Lai, Vietnam, and the base is currently under attack." This is during the Tet Offensive. So
what day is this, by the way?
I have no idea the date. Probably the 15th of February.
Okay. Of
1968.
Okay.
Maybe the 16th, because of date time. I have no idea what date it is now. So I go back and tell Al that we're going to Vietnam. So we get the senior sergeants there and we tell them what we know. The pilot then informed us that I cannot land this airplane. I'm not going to stop this airplane when we land. I'm just going to drop the ramp. You guys are going to have to pile out while I'm moving. And then I'll hope to get off, So plan to do that. Oh, shit. Okay, so we tell the sergeants, which we had about 8 master sergeants there, I think I remember seeing, most of whom had been in Vietnam before. Okay, so a lot of the troops had been there before. So go on the PA system and tell them what we know. So immediately they start breaking open all our pallets. They're in the rear of the plane, getting ammunition. Literally, grenades are rolling down the the corridor. We had seats. You know, we weren't sitting in the. We actually had seats in this plane. Grenades really rolling back and forth. Guys are cutting their arms off because we're wearing starch uniforms. You know, our dress fatigues, kind of a thing, and polished boots, the whole works. You know, ready for parade, really. So they start cutting their low bearing equipment in the right ways. You know, it's just it was a shit show. A shit show is all I can say. So all loaded up, everybody's got all the ammunition they could possibly carry. You know, we're all sitting there. Al and I try to figure out how the fuck are we gonna get these guys off the plane. And you know, we come up with a plan saying the ramp drops down. We've got 2 lines of men lined up, and you're gonna do your best rolling off the back of this ramp, according to what the pilot says, right? That's all, and then get to some grassy area if you find one, you know, and try to dig in there and reorganize ourselves. So the plane actually, you know, makes a stop, comes to a full stop. The ramp stays up. Ramp drops down, and a forklift truck shows up. And he says to us, "Oh fuck! I thought you were the male." So what can I say? What can I say? Then we all piled out, you know, so no one got hurt. You know, we didn't kill ourselves, what have you. We're in Chu Lai now. So that was our entrance into Vietnam.
And at this point, what? So you're part of what? You're still, is it the 505?
Second of 505, right?
All right. And you are leading that fine group.
I'm an extra officer. I'm hanging around the personnel officer. No one's talked to me other than Al.
And nobody really knows you either.
Not at all. Not at all.
Okay.
I'm just and so.
You're the new guy that just appeared out of nowhere who's an officer.
Right. He's a second lieutenant, you know. And so Al, we have a typewriter, and he's the personnel officer, remember? So he's got real responsibilities. He's trying to offload those things to me to help him out. You know, so we're trying to do everything that you can possibly imagine related to getting this whole battalion organized again, reorganizing the new quarters, getting jungle fatigues and stuff like that. And so meanwhile, they're cranking out orders, so I've become like the awards and decoration. Anything that Al didn't want to do, he gave to me, and they type up an actual order. And the clerk would come over and congratulations, Lieutenant, you're now the awards and decorations officer. Oh, types up to, now you're the payroll officer, and now you're the vector control officer, and now you're the recreation officer, and now you're this.
Wow, you have lots of titles.
And I'm just getting pissed, you know, I'm obviously pissed off with the whole thing, but I'm just doing my best to help out as I can, you know. And shortly after, we stayed only there a couple of days before we went up to Phu-Bai. So we got up to Phu-Bai before the rest of the battalion, and we showed up we put a bunch of country guys were put in a C-123. The plane came in, actually crash landed and took a piece of its wing off during a rainstorm up in Phu-Bai. Get out of that. In the far distance, you could see, because it was a rainy night, the Marines are trying to take Way. This is during the Tet Offensive, you know, so it was a real show from we could see from a distance. We were near a hangar. We had about 100 men dug into the sand. Had absolutely no idea. No one met us to tell us what was going on or anything like that. We just ourselves. It's all night. And we start hearing noises to our front. Grenades start going off in front of us, thrown towards us. We threw grenades back. kept digging our holes. The water's filling into our holes. And I could tell a whole story about that evening. Okay, the end result: we wake up in the morning. We're facing the First Marine Division, and they're facing us. And nobody got killed during the night.
Oh wow!
They did, yeah.
Wow! And
they say in war, you win wars by the people who make the fewest mistakes. But let me tell you, there's going to be a lot of mistakes. A lot of mistakes. Yeah.
what was your first impression of Vietnam when you got off the plane in Chu Lai?
Well, Chu Lai, it was pretty amazing. It was a very populated area, so there were Vietnamese civilians everywhere. But it was my first job there. Probably late in the day, they told me to go to some Americans that had been wounded in our unit already, to go out there and find out what happened. So I was in a Jeep put in a convoy to go out to a place called Fat City, which to now I don't remember where it was. It was a few kilometers away. So I'm in a Jeep convoy, and then some heavy equipment was put in the convoy, like excavator. And we're going around a rice paddy, and the excavator gets blown up. And the escort we had was military police, I guess. I really don't know if they were military police or not. They had a 30 caliber, the 7.62 on the pedestal on the Jeep, turns around and kills this guy out in the rice paddy. Apparently they'd found a wire, and there was, a farmer sitting out there, apparently right near the wire, and they just did him in. No one took a notice. No one took it. We just went around the excavator and on up to Fat City to find out what the hell was going on there, The weather was kind of crappy, so I wouldn't say what I saw of Vietnam was beautiful then. Later on, it becomes very beautiful, but it was mostly, you feel like you just landed on Mars. It was just so alien to it.
How so? Describe that for me.
Well, just it's the Asian culture, tropical. It's what I wasn't used to that, So I would say my head was on a swivel, trying to figure out what the hell everything was. So.
And so now you are up in Phu Bai, and tell me
Right.
what happens now.
Now we're building a place called Camp Eagle. It was going to be the home of the 101st, and the 82nd was OPCON to the 101st at that time. We wound up being an orphan brigade, so people would just latch on to us. Sometimes it would be the Cav, sometimes it would be the 101st, and we would be a supplement to their forces and their missions. So we were at Camp Eagle. There we were trying to build a base. It was going to be a very large base, just west of Hue, in near Highway 547, which led to Laos. And there we start building our fire bases, leading out towards Laos. And so I was there for a few weeks, and then still trying to get back to the 101st. There's a whole other story there. And they wound up giving me a new job. And I got to be the S3 Air, which was, I think, the best job you could possibly have for a young second lieutenant.
Well,
So
this was with the 101st?
No, this was still with the 82nd.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
with the 82nd.
why was that the best job?
Well, first of all, it gave me at so many levels, insight into what it's like to fight. So I participated in planning the missions that the different companies had to undertake, saw how they did it, worked closely with intelligence participated in all the combat air assaults, laid on, did all the coordination with the helicopters and the tactical air, worked the radios, learned how to really work the radios really well, how to do, calls for fire, which the average lieutenant really didn't get much practice at doing. I just got tons and tons of practice and insight into how the artillery worked. Got to listen to all the company commanders get debriefed. All night long we're on the radios listening to all the battles, like the lessons learned and stuff like that. It was like, drinking from a fire hose. But it just helped me absolutely immensely. I still hadn't been out very much. And I was able, I did firefly missions at night, in which we go down the Perfume River. I was given a map of all U.S. positions, 101st, 82nd positions. And since we're going down at night, down the river, with a searchlight, to be bait. And in back of us, hidden in the noise of the lower helicopter, which I was in, which is a regular Huey, there'd be gunships. And so they were looking to, we'd be going down with the searchlight, obviously looking for sampans and things like that for either people, North Vietnamese trying to reinforce their troops or otherwise, communicate or bring supplies into Way or vice versa. And so my job was to do that. On one occasion, we got sent over the Saigon River, and an ambush had taken place, a very large sampan by the South Vietnamese.
What's a sampan?
They estimated over 50 North Vietnamese were on that sampan.
What's a sampan?
It's a large boat.
Okay.
Large river boat. Yeah. So the helicopter hovered over that, and I could lean out, and I saw with our searchlight, and the pilot kept his searchlight on, even though rounds were coming up from the North Vietnamese to the helicopter, but he was hovering. And down below me, I see about 8 North Vietnamese trying to swim away. So I was able to drop grenades on them. And so those are the ones I first really knew I killed, because I just piled one grenade after another on top of them until there's nothing left of them down below. So you get missions like that. It seasoned me up, so I was really ready for a platoon. I was anxious to get a platoon, but I still had not been in the jungle.
So these missions are all in the air.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So.
All right, and this is still in Phu, correct?
Yeah, just west of Way.
All right. And this is still 1968?
Yes. 1968, yeah. So that's still February, March, April.
All right. And when was the first time that you were involved in combat on the ground?
Oh, much earlier.
Not including the 1st Marine Division, not those guys.
yeah. No, it was, I think I had just had a couple of incidents in which I, again, hanging around Route 1, I tried to I really wanted to get out in the field, so I was trying to find every reason to get out in the field with the companies, even though I was like in personnel. And so Al Levine, the S1, he gave me a lot of degrees of freedom to do that. So I went up to visit a company, and they were caught in a firefight right on Route 1. And I saw North Vietnamese troops run across the road, and I was out on the highway with my driver, who was a conscientious objector, and I take off running after him. Now, this might seem stupid, and in retrospect, it was extremely stupid. Okay, so I get up to this house where
By yourself? It's only you?
by myself, because I'm in a much better position to chase this guy than the guys from the U.S. infantry company, Alpha Company, because I saw him. I saw where he was going, where these two guys were going. And then it really get to a point where it's a fishing village, and it's on stilts, and it's got it's like a ramp kind of a thing, like a little pier. And I'm wondering whether I should knock on the door to go look. I mean, I have thoughts like this. Say, wait a minute, I'm not trained. I've talked to no one about what do you do with the civilians here, right? Do I just go in and blast, So the cooler part of my brain prevailed, and I said, wait a minute, you don't know what the fuck you're doing here. So I found a good position to kind of defend myself and keep a good eye out for where these North Vietnamese went. And waited a little while, and suddenly these South Vietnamese troops showed up on the road. I pointed to roughly where I thought they were, and they just come bombing in there. They guns blazing, what have you, and they killed the two of them. But so you can say, yeah, it's close to combat. It could have been done, I certainly didn't have anything to do with it in that way, but it begins to mature. Your brain begins to start working and say, how the hell do you survive in a situation like this? So I remember that being very significant.
So it sounds to me...
How was I going to act and not be a jackass,
It sounds like your emotions took over before your brain. You just ran into action. And then you tried to figure out what to do afterwards.
Right, that's the... Right, yeah.
Now, that could also have been your training, right? You were trained to pursue the enemy.
Right.
You just didn't know what to do once you did that.
Right, exactly right.
Okay. All right. What were your overall dates of service in the military? How long were you in for?
Well, it was 4 years in the active, so like August of '67. I don't remember when I got out. I overall had about 8 years, I think, in reserve, between active and reserve.
All right. And what was your highest rank when you got out?
Captain.
Okay. And so now you're still in Phubai. You told me about the helicopter mission and dropping some grenades. When was your first time? Let's talk about the first time that you were actually on the ground doing what you wanted to do.
Yeah, I was a platoon leader. And you mean the actual combat kind of thing?
Yeah, tell me about some of those experiences.
Yeah, it was quite a bit. I think I had platoon. I think from May till February of '69, I had the weapons platoon, and that was a mortar platoon.
This is a 505 still?
Say again?
This is still the 505?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Went down to Charlie Company, second to 505, and I was given the weapons platoon. And we functioned with the mortars or as a rifle platoon. More often than not, as a rifle platoon. So the first mission was like up near the location was near I'll say near LZ Boyd, and it just got the platoon. We went out on a I almost call it like training patrols. This is my first time in the jungle. And I had to get used to these guys. And most of them had some experience in Vietnam already, the first group, okay? So I wanted to listen to them. And so we get to a, we were just, you're out wandering around, basically, I say. Yeah, we had an objective or what have you, just to, our company commander was just trying to coordinate his own platoons and what have you. But I took one squad and went off on a reconnaissance, okay? So the ground there was not triple jungle. It was junglish, but not triple canopy. So at about 50 meters out, we see 3 or 4 North Vietnamese, and they're having lunch. So I bring the people, there's about 9 of us in the group I was with. I was the platoon leader, but I only had 9 men nearby. So I brought them up, had them line up, and I gave the order. I had them pick out their targets, and we fired. Okay, and they all dropped down. No return fire at all from them. Now, I told you it was about 30, 40, 50 meters away they were. So I'm faced with what I considered open ground to get there. And this is where I think I was very different from other lieutenants. I have no interest, even though the absolute excitement of, possibly killing them, getting weapons and stuff like that. And my men were anxious to get over there and check it out. And I said, absolutely not. It just looked like you weren't, first of all, you weren't certain that you killed anybody. For certain, even though I felt they had, the ground that we would have to cover to get over to where they were was shitty ground. They'd be exposed, and so 1,000 things go through your head saying, do I send 2 guys over? Do I send the whole 9 of us over there? One thing after another. And my judgment was no. When my company commander asked what was going on, I said, we spotted 4 men, fired on them, they got away. I had zero interest in recovery. To me, it just made no sense whatsoever to get a body count or anything like that, even though you'd think that's the first thing you want to do, and I was just wondering how the men would react to it, but I again reported that, they got away.
And how did your men react to that?
Hard to say, because a week later, they were all gone, because we had a reconstitution of the unit in the sense that all paratroopers were to be sent back to Fort Bragg and replaced with draftees. So it was shocking in one respect, So I thought I had, I thought I was moving into with a volunteer unit, with guys, and I'd learn how to adapt with these people. But instead, it was traumatic that we had to get draftees in and start all over again, with having no idea who you were going to get, what have you. So some of the airborne guys, we convinced to stay, but most of them, because they already had a tour, didn't want it and went back to Fort Bragg. So it was quite an unsettling experience.
So you stayed, but draftees came in along with some of the folks that stayed.
Yeah, and the good thing about that was I spent most of my time in Vietnam on TDY pay. So I can't.
On what pay?
It was temporary duty pay.
Okay.
So I was getting, even though we never did a jump in Vietnam, I was getting my $100 or whatever it was for jump pay, And then I was getting TDY pay, which is another $100 to $200 a month, which is great. And they also said that if you second lieutenants want to go back, you can, but your 3 months over there wouldn't count towards.
So you elected to stay.
I wanted to stay anyway. It didn't make any difference. But so now I have a completely new platoon coming in. Okay.
Okay, so now a new platoon comes in for you. So what happens with that, with the new guys?
Well, that's I had a good platoon sergeant, John Farrell. He truly was a mortar man, so he really could train up. Remember, my essential mission was to provide indirect fire, to mortars, okay? So if we had to defend something like a bridge or a village or something like that, then I'd be called upon to do that. And sometimes we'd be pulled away from the company to do that. In other words, it would take me away, my platoon away from my normal company and put us at some other strategic location, often for a very short period of time, 2 or 3 days or someplace like that. But we'd be away from the company, defending a bridge or a fire base or what have you. So we started the training with the men, and to get replacements coming in, another event takes place in which they said we're going to also create a new company called Delta Company. Everybody has to give up 25% of their men. So I had to give a mortar squad, and so now instead of having 40 plus men, I'm down to about 36 men, something like that. That's just trying to get these guys squared away. Remember, everything is OJT. I mean, we're still have responsibilities in the sense that providing outposts, things like that. And so these guys that come in, none of them have any combat experience. They just came from advanced infantry training from the States, some of which we had a little bit of a training when they arrived in country, and then they'd be fed into the platoon. And so the only thing I would request from Sergeant Farrell, who was he was my platoon sergeant, and he was, connected to the NCOs in the 82nd, was when you go back to the Repo Depot there, try to find me all the college-educated kids. So at that time, if you did maintain certain marks in school, and you lost your eligibility to stay in college, you were eligible for the draft. All right. So like I said, those are the guys I want. Give me the guys that dropped out of college, and we'll train them. And that really worked out great. Because these guys are just wonderful. I cannot speak enough. I was so leery of having draftees, and all the stories you hear about draftees. I would just put to bed. They were fabulous, almost to a man. Once in a while you get a real bad egg, but for the most part they were just wonderful guys.
Why did you have a preference for the college dropouts?
I just thought they would learn quicker, and they would probably be a little bit older. And there's huge differences between an 18-year-old brain and a 20-year-old brain. Huge differences, so that's what I was looking for, was that maturity, and that these guys would bond well together, and which they did. They found interest themselves. But mostly they talk about, they had to learn the environment, they had to learn the Army, They had to learn the company. They had to learn so much so fast, And I only had 2 squad leaders that were really any kind of experience at all. So that was just my thinking at the time. I think it paid off for me.
And this is still in Phubai?
Well, yeah. So now we're on a fire base called Boyd, Boyd, which is the start of Route 547, which is the one that goes towards Laos, the highway there. And we ran our operations out of there.
And was most of it reconnaissance?
Yeah, it was kind of like a movement to contact, reconnaissance and force, trying to find a source where they, routinely were attacking Way and what Vietnamese would be attacking Way and Camp Eagle, Phubai with 122 millimeter rockets. So they set their rockets up out of this particular area between the Perfume River and Route 547. And we'd be going in there trying to find these guys on that routinely. That lasted for quite a number of weeks on that. And then, let's see, then we got moved way out west to the area of what's called Vagel Lane, Fire Support Vagel, near the Ao Shao Valley. And there we just kept running, daily patrols. Once in a while we get in little firefights. I didn't lose anybody or hurt anybody badly hurt. Just little collisions. That's the only way I can describe it. They're all around you. They're absolutely all around you. They'd be following you, your unit. We'd be burying. We bury our trash, right? We know they'd be looking for the trash because they might be empty C ration cans. They may be full C ration cans and things like that. So we put booby traps in that. And once in a while you hear the boom go off that someone got a little too on the North Vietnamese side, or an animal. You didn't know for sure. And you hear the explosion in the distance. Well, something happened there. So we would just wander around every day and not knowing what could possibly happen, even though we knew lots of bad things could happen. So, and we, at that point in time, we pretty much were functioning as a rifle platoon.
And how many typically when you're out like that, you're with your group?
Yeah, the platoon operated usually with a company, and our companies were, remember, when I was the S3, I told you about the formation of Delta Company, where we all had to give up 25% of our staff, our personnel, to create a new company. So I used to mark up the daily mapping and what have you, but putting a big minus next to whatever the unit was, like Charlie Company minus, okay? Because the way I always thought about my company, the way a battalion commander would think about his companies is I've got a company there, it's got 180 men, and 180 men can do X, right? And I kept trying to say, you don't have 180 you've got 90 men. And I kept stressing that to the S3, and he was always so pissed off at me for that. Saying, oh, these, all my battalion commanders and what have, they're trained, a different way. They're thinking, I've got a battalion of, several hundred men. You don't have it. They're not there. 20% are always on sick leave or something, and then you already gave away to another company, so it's that kind of stuff going on there. So usually I was operating with 35 men, and operating pretty much by myself, meaning I was probably 2 hours by jungle to get to the rest of the company. So we'd be going down ravines, checking things out and what have you, and trying, to mutually support each other, but we were pretty much on our own the whole time.
But your group was about 30.
Yeah, 30.
And are you camping out overnight in the jungle?
Well, yeah, weeks at a time.
Okay.
At a time. So our uniforms fell off, basically.
And tell me about what that kind of feels like. What does it look like being out there, knowing you're being followed? You can have, as you call it, collisions at any moment.
Right.
What is that experience like?
Well, there's this sense of responsibility is almost overwhelming for an officer, I think, and I'm sure for the men. So you have to understand, the men know nothing. They're told nothing. We don't talk, okay? There's no get together at the end of the day and hash out what happened during the day. No, nothing like that was ever happening.
Why not?
We had to stay in a file. We couldn't operate with too many people. I very rarely could find terrain in which was safe to put out, scouts, because they could get lost out there. So we typically operated a file. We kept a point of about. I usually had a point man, a drag man, and just back of the point, myself, and my radio operator. So it'd be 4 of us up front. Then Sergeant Farrell, his radio operator in the rear, in case something happened to me. And the men operating in file, no talking. We didn't tolerate talking at all, unless they had something to say, obviously. Whispers, what have you. And we move all day long that way. Sending out little patrols and what have you, very little talking. At night, we curl into our perimeter in the best ground we could find, hunker down, no ass grabbing or anything like that. He didn't tolerate anything like that. And just wait for the dawn and the new missions that we would be given. All the time you're thinking about, how vulnerable you are, where you're going to be attacked from, all the mistakes you made during the day, what could be around the next little hill or ravine, and constantly trying to understand where are you on the map, because the maps weren't very, very good, and so you're constantly trying to figure out your position. And if you go 50 meters left, how does that change your targeting for artillery and what have you, and where do I call an artillery if I'm hitting it right now? Where do I call it in? What coordinates do I call in? So that's constantly going through your head. So it was actually a very full day. And then the beauty of the place, it was a beautiful place. I used to love the rain, and the guys would be pissing and moaning. You could, I loved it because it disguised our noise. It was just, oh man, monsoon, bring it on, But it was obviously physically miserable, but but I was thinking of security more than personal comfort for the men. But they were great. They were, they just slogged on, And couldn't help but like it.
And did that kind of operation where you have high stress, the unknown, and then no talking, did that kind of wear on people over time?
Well, the negative part of that was that I couldn't train them. How do you train squad leaders? Say, how do I know what they really know? What are they learning here? When I saw such deficiency. No, they were doing everything they were supposed to be doing, but we're still so many different kinds of encounters which we hadn't practiced yet that we could be suddenly faced with. And we hadn't had, group training on that. Everybody had their own individual training, what have you, but we hadn't practiced as a group to do things until you actually were in it. So how do you take out a machine gun bunker, Well, everybody kind of knew what you better be doing individually, but, wait a minute, how do we work as a team to do it? Well, that's all made up on the spot, given the situation, and that would not be a good thing, So you're constantly seeing the deficiencies of how we were approaching the problem, but the fact is we had to be out there looking for the bad guy, finding the base camps, which we did. We found the base camps and stuff like that, and just slogs out.
And in terms of describe a little bit what the living conditions were like in Vietnam. The food, the weather, temperature.
It changed. We were in the mountains up in, so we were, for several months, we were up in a very mountainous region. So at night it could get very cold. But it's something we all pretty much adapted to. There was it's hard to describe, but you get kind of used to it. If you can think of a place in which you try to put water in your mouth and it'd be full of fleas, bugs and stuff like that. You don't think twice about it. I mean, you do think twice about it, but that's the way it is, and you come to other areas in which there was no insects at all. And the bugs would get down, 10 o'clock at night, mosquitoes would, drift away, and we all had our poncho line, and we pull it over our heads if we could get some sleep. The men got very little sleep. The best you could hope for was 2 hours every 4, so I think the average in my platoon is something they might get 4 hours sleep a day. So you're constantly exhausted. The food was our sea rations, and then they started giving us what's called lerps, which were dehydrated food, which is a little bit better. At least has some variety to it. We didn't complain. Yeah, the men, of course they complained. I shouldn't say that. It was not a revolt.
And functioning.
We stayed out of the field. We eventually had a company commander, Robert Beckman, who took over the company, and he was hard ass, and he believed. I can't remember when he came in. I'm almost saying September. I had 2 previous company commanders. And he came in September. He's a real hard ass, ex-special forces, ex-Marine. He's given the company to try to make his career better, because at that time Special Forces was a career ender. And he was really no nonsense. He believed that we should stay in the jungle as long as possible. He volunteered us for everything. And that's pretty much how we ran it all the way till we wound up moving from the jungles to the mountains, which were full of jungles, actually. Then we were sent down towards Saigon. And then eventually my platoon wound up in the Parrots Peak near the Cambodian border, and then Nui Ba Den, which is the Black Virgin Mountain. And then the Michelin rubber plantation. So we got to see a lot of the terrain of Vietnam. Swamps. We got a taste of it all.
Which one did you prefer of all the different terrains?
I prefer the jungle. Yeah, because the jungle is good for both sides. The enemy couldn't really mount a very good attack against you because of the thickness of the jungle, and nor could we mount it. We had a better chance at defense there if we needed it. We couldn't do it. We couldn't do a very good attack either, because of the thickness of the whole thing. How far can you go? I just preferred it completely. It was just a much better environment to be in for what you're trying to do.
And
It was exciting because you never know what you're going to find. It was just, the joy we took in finding an enemy trail, was just fabulous. Look at this. Look what they did here, or a base camp,
And which terrain did you enjoy the least?
Swamp. Can't move fast in it, oh yeah, it's open ground, stuff like that, but we got to experience all of it, so.
Were you ever injured while in Vietnam?
Little dings, I got hit in the elbow, but I never, stomach, head, shrapnel and stuff like that, but I never left the field.
All right. And were you able to communicate with family while you were over in Vietnam?
Yeah, we had, we could write letters. We had a R&R, so I got to meet my wife in Hawaii. And that was it.
And how often was that communication?
I get a letter once a week or something like that. I think we had a battle of the battle of the mailbag, where we got our mailbag got dropped by helicopter, right? But it fell right into the North Vietnamese hands. We were down at the bottom of the slope, dropped down there. So we had to go fight for the mailbag, which we got. Nobody got hurt. God knows what happened to them, because we were shooting into there. But we managed to recover the red mailbag, so.
Operation Mailbag.
Right.
Okay.
The men took that. They took that fight on spontaneously before I even knew what had happened.
Well, I imagine that was personal.
They had already made their own decisions what to do. So.
Yeah. Don't mess with the mail.
Yeah.
What did you miss most from being overseas? From home.
Well, at the time, my wife, but I was really into being there. My R&R went very badly, I think, because I didn't want to be. I just couldn't. The economy of being in Hawaii when my platoon was back. God knows what was happening to them, for those 7 days. It just blew my mind. So you just felt like you wanted to be back with the platoon. That was absolutely all consuming.
So you couldn't relax while on your R&R?
Oh, no, not at all. No.
What was your proudest moment while in the military?
I never asked that question. I don't know. I don't know. I think I got almost all my men back. Not all of them. Some were damaged psychologically afterwards, I know. It's hard to say what's proudest, I still believe we were doing something that was right, because if anyone thought things were bad, the other side was so much worse. everything I believed in about the bully. The always against the bully, and the North Vietnamese, the cruelty that they displayed to their own people and their own troops and what have you was incomprehensible to me. That they had no sense of humanity, despite all the rhetoric and what have you. And so, to this day, I felt that was a worthy fight. So,
like what were some examples of that you observed?
well, in the village of Namwa, which was right near one of our fire bases there, they came in one day, and we were running a patrol, and the kids came up to us, and frightened and scared and what have you. And apparently, this is very early on. They had asked, the teacher there was probably 17, 18 years old. She's a young woman. I didn't know her, but this is what the villagers told me, that she'd been asked to stop teaching by the VC. So she still continued to teach. They came in one day, cut her head off in front of the students, put her on a table. That's when we got there. And then about 2 weeks later, her brother shows up. I believe it was her brother, showed up to start teaching there. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that was, I'd say it was fairly routine, that they would try to, the VC operating a little bit differently from the North Vietnamese, were hardcore underground, and they were cruelty and destruction of anybody who supported the government infrastructure was their number one job. So anyone that was important to a village, what have you. And other than the My Lai massacre and a few other terrible cases there, that wasn't us. You can blame us for a lot of bad things that happen in any war, but that was not us. We were not doing that kind of shit. So, and it turns out that must have worked, because most of my men, even though I said they were draftees, most of them I've heard after I left opted to re-up for in other words, stay another 3 to 6 months in Vietnam to finish their tour up. So there had to be something there pulling them into saying this is worthwhile.
And overall,
although at the time, no one had a hope we were going to win this. That was never even none of those officers, none of us ever believed we would win this war.
So what were you doing if you weren't going to win it?
Here's a good question.
Well, how did you rationalize it? What were you doing if you weren't going to win it?
Just trying to do the mission and try to save as many men as execute the mission at the least cost to us as possible in human life. Don't think beyond that. That's greater minds than ours were at work. And we had no influence over anything. And that's what I would tell the guys, saying, for 1 year, you've got 1 year here. You follow our orders. Don't think about what's going back in the States. And, remember I'm there at the time when I brought, black troops. I had 4 or 5 black troops to my platoon, and we're killing Robert F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, all occurred while we were there, and the riots and everything like that. And just could talk to them and say, guys, we can absolutely, I'm a northerner, right? So my sympathies would always be with that. And most of the military are Southerners. Although the draft kind of eased that off a little bit, but it's mostly, certainly, Southerners prevailed in volunteering, what have you, for the military. They just told them that this is, that they just had to, we're going to get them home somehow, but just had to follow orders, and we'll do our best to do that. They were wonderful. It was great.
Overall, how long were you in Vietnam?
A year.
Okay. And then so you're in that base in the west, Was that the last place that you were at?
Where?
You were in the. You described a base that you were out west. Was that the last
Well,
deployment?
yeah. No, so we wound up. I told you down near Saigon.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were down there Saigon for a long period of time. I'm running operations out of there, out to the Cambodian border, and Nui Ba Den, which is the Black Virgin Mountain, biggest mountain they had in Vietnam. So we worked around there, and then at the end of my tour, I was in the Michelin rubber plantation, and I was extracted from there at the end of my time, and that was, that's north of Cu Chi. So we were around Cu Chi too, a lot, for operations there, on a triangle. And that.
So, what would be your most interesting or memorable story from Vietnam? I know you have a lot, but you got to pick one.
Probably a night ambush. This is up near Hoc Mon, the city of Hoc Mon, which is north of midway between Cu Chi and Saigon. I was told that there was going to be an attack on a village chief, an assassination attempt. So I just had a squad leader killed, and I wanted to see how the new squad leader was going to operate, so I decided to go with him at night. So we had 9 men, and we'd heard of these kind of intelligence reports before, so you didn't really expect much. So we went off towards this village, and we couldn't, since it was a last minute thing. I had never been to this place before, so I set up on I wound up realizing this is way beyond what this new squad leader could handle. So I wound up taking charge. So I set up an ambush right on the outskirts of the village, make sure that the villagers could see the ambush while it was still light. And then about 10 o'clock at night, I moved the ambush. We went further into the village. And about 2 o'clock in the morning, now we're about 50 meters from the village chief's compound, in which we had a forward observer and chock full of South Vietnamese troops just hanging out there. And one of my men comes up to me and says, "Are the South Vietnamese out tonight on patrol?" And I said, "No, they're not." "Well, I just saw a pile of them." "What do you mean you saw a pile of them?" "They're coming down the path over here." And I said, "Go back, light them up with the clay, we're still in the circle, underneath these palm trees and what have you. I have 360-degree coverage, So I'd scurry over to where he was. And sure enough, you could see these figures in the distance. They got walking down towards us. And so we fired the claymore in front of his particular position, and then the world just started to light up. And then I could see from another position, another road, more shooting taking place and more movement. And suddenly, what was really occurring, and this was only after the action, it was an enemy company that was coming to make the attack. And there's 9 of us. And so, just long story short, because so much happened during it. We managed to. They had no idea we were there, and apparently the spot I had picked was their rendezvous spot too. Before they were going to do their attack, so they seemingly be confused. They thought they might have spotted our people, laying in the ambush or what have you. I don't know that for a fact, but thought, okay, the scouts are in position, so we'll bring the rest of the guys down there. And then, big mistake on their part, because then we loaded, we blew all our claymores, got back to another position pretty quickly. And at the end of it, I didn't lose anybody. We had taken out, there was 3 dead laying there, right next to it, near us. And the next morning, and the next couple of days, more bodies were being brought out to the road. And altogether, about 15. And so it was, I'd be wasting your time telling you everything that happens in a battle was much more complicated than what I'm describing. But it was like all hell broke loose, and we were the beneficiaries of the whole thing. Because South Vietnamese thought we were the bad guys. So I was kind of caught in a crossfire between what was coming out of the compound. But we managed to, through good luck and hopefully some good training, what have you, that we managed to evade all the bad stuff and leave the bad guy with a black eye. Which is just sad, because they were these young kids, you could tell they were only 16, 17, North Vietnamese were only 16, 17 years old. And that was the end of their lives.
So that company ended up retreating.
Oh, yeah.
They had no idea what they were running into.
Oh, right. They had absolutely no idea.
And lucky for you, they retreated, because you only had 9.
I only had 9, but I think I had situational awareness and they didn't. Everything could collapse in a second. Suddenly, a good position can be a bad position. So I don't take anything more than that. That's where a little bit of luck or serendipity is a determinant of who wins and who loses.
Yeah.
But we had a number of other battles that were worse than that. So, but that was a remarkable night. But there's also funny stories too. I had so many. Once we were out in the ambush night, and we were in sampans. Okay, so in our night patrols, these are things that are about 15 feet long and about 2.5 feet wide, with big GI. So we get out in the water, and we use the sampans to get the ambush positions, what happened. So every night we'd send out our 3 or 4 sampans because we were in swamp. We were living in the swamp kind of thing, trying to guard a bridge, and set out the outposts. And so one night I hear the machine gun go off because they had spotted someone moving in there, right? And then it's complete silence. No radio contact, nothing. So I'm worried sick. I'm just worried sick. What the hell? What happened out there? Next morning, the guys come back. They're all okay. And even though they're college kids, they probably skipped a class in physics, of action versus reaction. So if you're in a sampan, and when they let the loose get that M60 go, sampan flipped over, right? Shoot. So just firing the gun overturned the sampan from the recoil. So now they've lost the machine gun, and they're flying around, and they know they better come back with that friggin' machine gun. So after they secure it, so it's just stories like that, because it could have been a nightmare, it could have been drownings. Instead, it was these guys knowing they were going to be getting such shit from me that they would spend all night searching for a machine gun.
But they found it.
Right.
Okay. And then from Vietnam, where did you end up going? So you went back to
Or
Fort
any
Bragg?
I told you my company commander was ex-Special Forces, and he wanted me to join his. He was going back to Special Forces, and he wanted me to join his team. And so I got transferred into Special Forces, but by then he was killed. And so I wound up in a different unit with the 10th Special Forces, which is, more devoted to the Russians at that time. So off to Turkey and places like that for my exercises and stuff like that. So.
Okay. Forces, and tell me what that's like. And what are you doing for them, by the way?
Well, because so I hadn't gone through Special Forces training yet, but I got assigned to the Special Forces, and so I had to a lot of things had to happen because I had a business background degree, and I hadn't been through Special Forces training. My new commander said, "You're going to be the logistics officer, the S4, which is just logistics, okay?" All right, you got to take some of these jobs, right? And so I became the logistics officer, which is pretty good, actually. I've learned some, a whole new aspect of that. Then I had to go through Special Forces training. And then...
how was that before you move on? How was Special Forces training compared to, say, Ranger training?
At that time, it's different. It was different, okay? Completely different. Because the orientation of Special Forces was mostly to, how do you assist a guerrilla group in creating an army, right? So the training was very different, a lot of fun. I enjoyed those kind of programs, it was just a lot of fun. And, you put all the misery aside, but it was, to me, it just suited me terrifically. Because you had to learn Morse code, you had to learn demolitions, first aid again, which I never had really. So you had to learn all the team skills to be an officer there. And you're supposed to have language to get into it. I could barely speak English, is the way I looked at it, much less. So I didn't know how it was going to fare there, But from the get-go, I would not qualify to be Special Forces because you had to be language qualified to be in it, to be an officer anyway.
What language did you pick?
Well, they initially started me on Farsi, which was one of the language for the Iranians, Persians. But I was getting very little language training because I was just so busy. I had to do I was really, an active S4. We had teams everywhere in lots of places in the world that I had to support. So I would, it was 24/7. You just worked 24 hours a day. And so it was just, every day was just wonderful in the sense that you could, it was everything you could possibly learn. You were trying to learn, all weird stuff, it was just, and I always continued in Special Forces that way. I never wore my Class A's that I ever remember. Maybe at a party at the Officers Club, I had to wear my Class A uniform. It was just fatigues. And a lot of parachuting in. So eventually I was given command of it's called a B team. So I had 4 to 6 A teams underneath me. Initially 4 A teams. And I was also in charge of high altitude, low opening parachute training for the Special Forces. Making the jumps from 24,000 feet at night, stuff like that. So I was in charge of all that. Getting through that. So it was just, then operations off to Turkey and Greece and a few places like that. dealing with smugglers and who cross the Russian border. Little operations like that. That gave you a lot of exposure to things, the world at large. So it's just it was a great life. And then it was time to leave because my wife was really I hardly ever starved. So if there's anything to save a marriage, which eventually did fail, she wanted me out. And so that's when I went to graduate school, but stayed in the reserves. But that's how that aspect of my life ended, and I went into a private career.
In terms of your special forces, did you go out in any combat missions for them?
No, none. No.
And that was all with the 10th Special Forces?
Yeah, and then reserves, the 11th Special Forces.
All right. And did you receive any medals or awards for your military service?
Yeah, I got a bunch, a few Bronze Stars, a couple of Bronze Stars, Valor, Army Foundation Medal, some participation awards. Yeah, stuff like that.
What was the Bronze Star with Valor for?
That was for that battle that I told you about in the village.
Okay.
But I was surprised at anything I got, because it was just in that one because I had asked had the men leave, and I stayed behind during that battle to give them cover, and then I wound up thinking that the best defense with one guy is a good offense, so I wound up going the opposite direction, right into him, and that turned, I was able to take out a few there, and then I was trapped, and then two of my men came back for me, and they took out a machine gun nest, a machine gun unit, and we all got back okay. Well then, strangely, who gives you out a medal? No one else, I don't even know how it happened. I didn't get this stuff until afterwards. I never even saw my officer efficiency reports till I was actually interviewed for the CIA. It was after I got through graduate school, I decided, well, maybe I'll go back in, because the CIA offered some really good opportunities for me that I liked, but my wife eventually said no. But anyhow, that's the first time I ever saw what an officer evaluation report looked like, so if I knew, I would have stayed in, I think, had I seen what the reports said, which were generally pretty favorable, so I didn't know it. So.
Have you heard the phrase that war is hell?
Say it again?
Have you heard the phrase war is hell?
Yeah.
All right.
It is.
Do you agree?
Yeah. Absolutely.
How so?
Oh, it's just it's a cruelty. It destroys. It transforms you for one thing, but it's also very likely to destroy you. The inhumanity that takes place is uncalled for at every level. It just no need for it. There's never a need for it that I can see. And we just don't have, I'm not going to get too philosophical about it, but it's a complete waste of humanity. Complete and total.
You mentioned that it transforms you. Did you experience that transformation?
Oh yeah, whatever I was before, I was very different afterwards. I think it helped in many ways improve my character. I like to think it did, but other ways, we still had to deal with doing some awful things. I could say, probably and I knew after a battle, you're policing the battlefield. I mentioned that it's called policing the battlefield. In other words, you're looking do you find the bodies? Where are the wounded? Yada yada yada. Yeah. And I remember on one occasion, I didn't want my men to do that. I thought it was too dangerous. But I knew I had to figure out what, did we just shoot somebody or what? So I decided to do it. But I couldn't find, I could follow the blood trail. And I just didn't want my guys to do it. So I was following the blood. You follow the blood trail, but not right, a few, many meters away from it, trying to bounce back and forth. Where's this guy gone? And it's only in retrospect after you think about it. Then you do a recon by fire, so well, maybe he's in that bush over there. You drop half a magazine into it, right? See if any of the areas until you finally you see a foot or something like that, and then you blast the whole magazine right into him. If you just, in this case, it was a leg I could see, Don't know if he's wounded or not. And then in retrospect, here's this poor fucking kid, wounded. Maybe I could have captured him. Boom. What? Instead, you just shred him, So that's the kind of stuff that's transformational in the sense of how it comes back to, at the time, I was very good at suppression because you had them. So later on, things like that could come up bothering, and I could see that be the basis of PTSD for a lot of folks. Taking small little incidents like that, even though what they were supposed to do,
So is this a conflict of, say, compassion, humanity versus survival?
Yeah, survival's at the top. That really has to be, that's job one. But it really, it can really get to you. Like I had one guy, we had captured a North Vietnamese kid. He was wounded badly. I had a medic attached to me, and he wanted my albumin. I carried albumin, a blood expander, and he wanted to use the albumin for this wounded North Vietnamese kid, and I wouldn't let him do it. So, he was just. I just knew that medic was so angry at me. The North Vietnamese kid died. I had him gag. I said, "You gag him because this is nighttime. You gag him, and we can work on it. But you gag him up, and I don't, tie him down. This is not comfort kind of stuff. You can work on him the best you can, plugging holes. But I'm not giving you the albumin." And there, my decision is, I still got GI, my own guys. What's going to happen in the next minute or two? And that's the stuff you're weighing. And of course the medic, months later, he refused to go in my platoon. He told that I will not go with that lieutenant. And but that's just, I knew it. And I never tried to apologize to him or explain it either. But those are the kinds of, this is like day-to-day stuff. I can't, it's giving you little episodes, but this is the day-to-day life in a infantry platoon in a war zone. That every hour, every day, every night is different from the one before, and every decision could be a bad decision or a good decision. So it's just it's constantly weighing in your mind all the time. Playing on that.
Did you ever get used to that type of ethical dilemma, the trauma of it all?
Yeah.
You become hardened to it? You become hardened to it?
Yeah, hardened. It was always, I always, I guess I made some hard and fast rules. Like if there was an attack, I insisted on the men to shoot the enemy wounded. when you cross over enemy position, like we don't know what we're going to encounter, trench lines or what have you, said you've got to kill the wounded. Don't leave anybody in back of you, okay? And so these are orders, whether they were carried out the right, we didn't, sometimes more often we didn't have that opportunity to do that, but those are the orders I would give, that hey, in this next hour or so, we're going to be assaulting in this particular direction. This is what you're to do. You've got to understand that, that if you have just one guy wounded in the jungle, it takes 4 to 6 guys to move him. You got 30, and suddenly you're ineffective as a unit, because you're taking care of, you get 2, 3 wounded, which I had sometimes, and you just can't have that, so you want to reduce the chances of your losses as much as possible. And then unfortunately, after the battle clears and what have you, then you kind of, you clean up the best you can. And so, we weren't executing wounded. That's very different than what I'm talking about. And we were able to capture enemy, and do it that way. But you're just trying to make the best decision with the information you have at the time. And that's and believe me, it's fighting a battle looking through a soda straw. You haven't got any idea what's going on 50 feet away, 10 feet away. What the hell is happening? The noise level is so high. Rounds are going everywhere. You're dicking and dodging. People are screaming. It's a shit show of the first order.
Sounds like chaos.
Yeah, absolute chaos.
Did your experience from war impact you in any way when you returned home?
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, I certainly wound up having PTSD, but I was high functioning. And I learned a lot about PTSD. But it's PTSD in the sense that you get the same thing if you saw anything traumatic, an auto accident, if you're anything like that. But I found in myself that a lot of the memories I had were false memories. That I was creating memories that were not true. You think of a tape. I play in my mind something that happened, but I'd slow it down. I used that example where I had to wound up killing a wounded guy. Possibly he could have been already dead. I don't know. Could I have done something better? When did I decide to pull the trigger? And you slow the tape down, slow it down. There was a moment in which I could have been more compassionate and done, and done something like that, and that makes you a bad person, and that kind of stuff. So I saw myself doing a lot of that, and gradually worked that out, worked that way.
Were these more feelings of like guilt, like you were second guessing,
yeah.
And this was your first example was as to an enemy. Did you have any of those feelings as to your own comrades? I mean, people you may have lost or that got wounded. Decisions you made that maybe you second guessed those.
Oh, sure, yeah. It's just one time we were in January of '69. We wound up getting surrounded out near the Cambodian border. Surrounded meaning that we were in a perimeter. We'd been fighting the previous day. We had wounded. We had 2 men dead. No evacuation. We were carrying our dead with us and the company. We didn't know we were in the middle of just piles of them, I guess. And we were surrounded. And the morning came that we wanted to clear our perimeter, so the company commander ordered one of our platoons to, move forward to clear it, see what's ahead of you. Kid gets up, he's shot down. wounded. Then the platoon next to me, they're ordered, and I knew the kid that got up, Kevin McCluskey. He got up and he was vaporized by a B-40 rocket, hit him directly in the body, and that was only about 30 feet away. And this huge spray of red, just drifts over in a beautiful morning, just glistening, just goes across my platoon. And then I'm told to do it. And I have to select a squad leader to lead out. And I did, Sergeant Martin. And he got up to move, and he's immediately shot down in the chest. So, what can I say? It just... you think about things like that. Should I have done something differently at that moment? Or, so it's just 100 things, that just pile on, that can make you or break you.
You said high functioning. Like, what impact did it have on you that you were able to cope with it? How did it affect you?
Well, I think the toughest part, what I did early on, and how it affected the relationship. I had a sergeant called Sergeant Wellesley, a tech sergeant at Northeastern ROTC. So I sat down one night drinking with him, and I was asking questions. How do I be a good lieutenant? What do you? He was in Korea and Vietnam, and he says one thing you have to understand is you have to look at your men and think of them as dead. Okay, you study every man from behind, because that's how you're going to see him, in a battle. So you look at them from behind, so you know how they walk, how they carry their equipment, and stuff like that. And then you envision them dead, with their guts torn out, their limbs torn off, every single one of those individuals, So when it happens, you're not shocked by it, because you've already pictured it happening. Okay, so you line up, that's all you do that for all your men, so because that is going to happen. Their heads are going to get blown off, their arms and hands are going to go disappear, in a fight. They're going to get stomach wounds and what have you. You picture them in all those different positions, all your men, and because you can't crack, you're the lieutenant, you cannot crack at that moment. You've got to be able to make something happen, And I took that to heart, but I also took it to heart with all my relationships. It never turned off for decades. I look at women the same way. Okay, you're gone. So if something happened to any of my friends or what have you, I would have no feeling about it. Isn't that weird? And that, oh my God, it was just automatic with me. So I could lose a friend, a family member, or what have you. I would have zero impact on me as far as an emotional crisis, on that. So I've always thought that was an interesting. I can't say what was good or bad about it, but I certainly didn't crack in battles. Nothing bothered me. So that aspect of it worked. But how do you turn that off? You're supposed to turn it off, right? I didn't. That took maybe 30 years, 20 years. I don't know. Finally it did, But, so that was the only way I can describe that long-term. But otherwise, it was very high functioning.
Any other type of symptoms that you had? Was there like hypervigilance, kind of like?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, I don't walk next to somebody and I'll walk. I find myself letting them drift a little bit to the left, front, and I'll go right rear, So, the way a patrol would operate, I don't like to walk next to somebody.
Really?
We're supposed to be staggered. That's how I walk my dog, It's those kind of habits just never, looking backwards, that's just constant, just the constant.
Do you find yourself scanning for danger still?
Oh yeah.
Still.
Yeah, that's still. Oh yeah. I'll go into a situation. I'll go anywhere. Yeah, that still was. Well, part of that was we had a thing in Special Forces training, which was a fun exercise to do. It was called the room. Okay, and I just never forgot that exercise, that drill. You go into a room and you're going to be interrogated, right? And you're supposed to be a prisoner or something like that, right? And there's all this stuff around, and what they trained you to do is look for everything in there that's a weapon that you could use. And it gets to be, it's kind of fun in a way. See that pencil that guy's holding? Oh man, that's going right in your eyeball. If I get hold of it, you look at every little thing. I mean, so, and that gets in your head after a while. You go into a room or a restaurant and something. Okay, it's. but
So you find it. So is it safe to say you have found it tough to turn off your military training in some of those examples?
Oh yeah. And you wind up hanging with people, your friends and stuff. It's almost self-reinforcing because we like to talk those stories and stuff like that, and remind ourselves, and you think about it. Honest to God, I was thinking of joining the Ukrainian army. And I'm 79 years old. I said, Jesus, I could, I might only be a speed bump for the Russians. They go right over me. But I sure as shit like to be there and try to, got some ideas.
Why would you like to be there at 79? Like, what is that thing that's in you?
I mean, because it's the cause. If you don't stop the Russian, I feel sorry for the Russian conscripts. The fucking asshole, Putin. I mean, that's really a much more obvious case, of the bully. And I grew up on that ethos. That's how my father trained me. And I bought off on it, and I still feel it's you stand up against the bully.
Is there any part that's related to like kind of the rush of combat?
Oh yeah, I mean I liked it. I never took drugs, but the adrenaline rush. I mean, that's what parachuting and stuff like that. I mean, there's nothing I didn't try. I've been mountain climbing and stuff like that, just scuba, the whole works. I just love that stuff.
Did you continue to do like high adrenaline things afterwards?
Okay. Yeah. I just this summer I was paragliding at the Matterhorn. So, which I consider nothing very easy, But it was just, I love that stuff. I mean, it's just that's where that's one thing to say about military service and the fact you're in these difficult things. You can really appreciate water. After you ran out of water and you're stuck in a sniper, it's kind of pinging at you, and you have no water, and you're in a rice paddy. That fecal matter water that you're laying in tastes so good. When you forget about a glass of champagne. When you've been baked, that or you're freezing to death, and you've got that little poncho liner around it, and you get a little bit of warmth, and your buddy's backs to you, warming you up a little. Oh, there's nothing better than that, And so you can appreciate all those elements of life, that you being out in the edge.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, it's worth going to, and you never forget it once you're there.
What about bad dreams or the inability to sleep?
I never really. No, I never really had. No, I just could not. I couldn't. Night wasn't that never bad for me. I never had. It, you know, my wife, my second wife. You know, she sometimes I would wake up startled or something like that. But no, I never had those kind of nightmares of any consequence. But I couldn't. In When it was bad, I couldn't go from point A to point B in my car without turning the radio on full blast. So my brain wouldn't go there, you know? So I'd use sound to shut my brain down.
How long did you have that? Where you
Well,
needed...
decades. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So you needed to distract your thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah. So I didn't want a long period. But, you know,
And what are these thoughts that you're trying to avoid primarily?
all this, what I mentioned before, you know, I never felt that he did anything bad, you know, that kind of guilt kind of a thing. It's just that, you know, I know all my men didn't get through the right way, you know, you just feel that you're responsible for them, you know. That's the, you know, an Army officer is responsible for everything they do and everything they didn't do. You didn't, that's the, and that sticks with me, you know. You're responsible for everything you did and everything you didn't do. And I can think of times when I was tired and when I know they could have done this better, and you know, and why didn't I know how? Yeah, that guilt is huge, huge.
And some of this you still have today?
Oh yeah, yeah. But I mean, I'm very functional, very functional. Yeah, yeah. Until day I die, you know, because that's still remains an issue, you know, that you know you've caused harm in some way by your own weakness or lack of, you know.
Do you consider, well, you just said weakness. Do you consider some of these symptoms a sign of that you may be weak? Is that kind of like a consideration that you have?
Well,
From like a soldier's perspective?
Yeah, it's just you just want to be better, you know, and set a high standard for myself, and you know, that human.
I mean,
I understand all that, you know. I've got frailties like everyone else. So that's, you know, and I was tired, or this, you know, and I made a bad decision here, or could have done better there, and all this, you know. So I understand all that intellectually. Then there's an emotional side to it that, you know, was a little harder to control.
is that also like a dichotomy where, like what you're talking about before, um, where you have the soldier mentality where you're supposed to be strong and tough and nothing bothers you, versus why am I feeling like this? Like, does that cause a conflict?
I don't think I ever had that. You know, I can laugh at myself pretty easily. Very, you know, I just never thought of myself as that macho kind of a person. I never felt that at all, ever.
Okay.
Just, in fact, I could just tell you a little side story. I was just in the hospital. Okay, I told you I thought I was going through a cardiac event, and the EMT is taking me to the hospital. He wants to relate to me, so he said, I know you've been a soldier, and I've got this 45. What do you like? What do you like about the 45 caliber? Now I'm sick as a dog, thinking. I can't tell you how sick I am. I've been vomiting blood. And the medic, the EMT, is asking me, you know, I've got a 3-pound trigger pull. What do you think of the 3-pound trigger pull? You know, and a 30-second travel on the trigger. And so what do you say to something like that? Well, I know we're trying to relate, you know, but, you know, this is, I'm not that kind of a guy.
He's probably trying to keep you distracted.
Right, yeah, but it was really kind of funny. Really funny. Let's see that.
When you returned back home from Vietnam, how were you received?
Very well. Yeah, I landed Oakland Airport, I'm having a meal. The waitress comes over. I want to pay, and she said, "No, the man over there, he's paid for your bill." And then I walked down to the airline and say, "I got to get to Boston," and so they at the gate at the ticket counter, they said, "Oh, we're going to hold the plane. It's due to leave right now. We're going to hold the plane, and we're not going to charge you for the ticket." And we got to, and so I get there, and they had a seat for me in the back, and it was one of these weird planes which had a lounge. So they put me in the lounge. So that was my welcome back. People were just so nice to me. I didn't have any of that. We had one incident at Fort Devens in which they were trying to teach us special forces crowd control because there was a lot of protests. So there's going to be a thing at the gate, but this particular base only has special forces, right? We're not made up for any of this kind of stuff, It's not regular infantry or anything like that, So they try to teach us how to do crowd control with these protesters, right? So we get to the gate, and it was, all the protesters are out there, and we've got our bayonets and everything like that, and sheath bayonets and our gear and all that.
But this was a practice, though, right?
Huh? No, this is going to be a real protest.
Oh, okay. Real protest.
Real protest, could be really bad, And so this guy, I think he was a major or something like that. He gets in a truck with his bullhorn, and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I understand you want to, attack the base and stuff like that. We can't have that, So the guys below you here, these troops, they just got back from Vietnam, The last thing they want to do is be in a confrontation with you guys, They probably all agree with me. but let's try to keep this down. And it totally diffused the entire situation. Completely diffused it, The kids said, "Okay, all right, what the hell?" I thought that was pretty good. It's just
is there
that was your question, but I just remember that's
is there anything you'd like to add that I did not ask you today?
Just remember how wonderful those draftees were. That they should bring the draft back. I don't agree with the professional army, because it's only through the draftees that you get the idea of what society's really like, So I'm always afraid that people become too macho, too oriented towards thinking that we're really good, better than we are, and that's not the case. You need that civilian touch. Yeah. And, so that's the only thing I would ever suggest. It's a big mistake. I mean, we had to have a wonderful professional corps, breathtakingly wonderful, and the training that goes on, what have you. But I think you need to rotate people through. I always think if national service. It doesn't have to be Army. The whole idea of national service to bond people together, different backgrounds and ethnicities and points of view and stuff like that makes a stronger country. So I wish that would happen. I support that and I'll fall hard because I saw how it works.
Is there anything you would like to tell future generations?
Only that the search for wisdom in people is a worthy search, because I don't think it comes naturally out of the political environment. It doesn't come out of the smartest people. The most intelligent people don't necessarily have wisdom. Have the right people in the right job at the right time. That's the challenge of the future, I think. And good luck to us. Because I don't think we're on that path right now.
Well, we shall see.
We'll see.
Well, I want to thank you, Donald, for taking the time to speak with me. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I want to thank you for your service to our country as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Patrick. Good luck with your project is. Thank you. Bye-bye.